Okay, and we're back. So, this is a part two of the pyro advection stuff that we've been doing on my channel. I want to walk you guys through some things that I've learned. I received a comment from one of my viewers, and as you can see on the screen, this is the comment that he left. Um, Appreciate the comment. You can add respectfully at the end of that comment too. But anyways, I appreciate it. It really helped in how I can deal with this in the future in terms of the amount of particles that I'm dealing with, and also the fact that it slows down the viewport. So I'm gonna create another sim and just do something a little different. Just kind of create a variation of different pyro advection simulations, and we'll go from there, and I'll show you the new tip that I learned in that. And basically what it is, it's using particle instances, which is a modifier, and then from there using geometry nodes, because you're generating particle instance from a single vertice, and then from those vertices you're generating a mesh via geometry nodes, and then you have a optimized scene, and then you can kind of do anything that you want with it. And it's kind of an alternative to the limbic workflow. So it's a great workflow, and I'm really glad I learned that. So thank you again. So let's jump into it. Hide this camera. We're gonna go to a side view, and then we're gonna go to vertices. Delete this, and then one more thing. Oops, I did something to my wrong tag on it. There we go. All right, that's what I wanted to do. Technical issues. All right, so you're just going to delete the bottom portion of the sphere. Go back to object mode. And then that's exactly what I want. And then I'm going to set this to be a quick effects again. So smoke. And then also edit this simulation box or domain. I'll move that up, select everything, hit S, Shift Z, widen it out just to make sure it has enough space, and then also make sure it has enough vertical space too. All right, so back to object mode. We have the fluid sim, and then I'm going to add, not add, but edit my smoke to fire as I've done before. Change this to 10. I'm going to set the initial velocity to 16 so that it's moving fairly quick off the surface. And then also change inflow to geometry so that it's just a flame that's burning. Not a continuous flame, but just a quick burnout. So it's kind of like a mini little flame explosion. I don't know what you want to call it, but I'm also going to set this to 32 for now, just so that it can repeat faster as I set this fluid sim up. All right, our fire simulation. Next thing that I want to do is take a look at this to see if there's anything I want to change. I want to change this to 64. Play it back. So just a little bit more detail. And we don't need a lot of detail in this actually, too, to get what we want. That way I can get through this faster and make more variations of it as I'm creating these things. So actually, this is the last thing I need to do. And from here, I just need to cache it out. So as we've done before, I'm going to set this to all. I'm going to go to advanced. I'm going to set this to none, set this to full. And then I'm going to set this to 128 and then change my frame time or my timeline to 128 too. Hit home just to frame it. Just so that there's enough time for that sim to happen and there's smoke rising in the heat. And so when I do the particles, it's taking in that information too. So that's the reason I'm doing that. So now we're going to cache it. So I got everything set up and I'm just going to hit bake all, and it's going to just run through real quick and cache my file. Again, as I've said before, it's a good idea to cache your file in a place where you got space. I'm just caching it locally right now for the video sake, but cache it on an external drive so that you're keeping space on your hard drive too. All right, so this is wrapping up, and then we'll check it. Sometimes there's issues when you run these cache files too. So let's play it back real quick. So it came out right. It's good. So sometimes your cache will not come out right, and you'll just have to run it again. So I always double check that I have my timeline set to the beginning, and then I run the cache. I don't ever try to like run it right here and then play the cache. I always set it to the beginning, run it, and if it does come out wrong, you can just click this free all button and then start over and run it again. All right, so we got that set up. I'm going to move the domain into my fluid sim collection, and then we're going to go to our side view. I'm going to select the sphere here, and I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm going to duplicate it, press S, and then just like that. And to duplicate, press Shift D, by the way, and then I press S to scale it out. And so I want it just bigger than this flame here, because my particles are going to sit on this new sphere that I have, and they're going to get pushed out from the fire that's expanding. All right, so I'm going to move this sphere down here. I'm just going to name it sphere. Let's see, sphere particle sim. We'll call it that, just so that we name our stuff. All right, so we're going to add a particle sim plus, and then we're going to set it to 128,000. It's going to start on frame 1, end on frame 1, so that all of our particles are visible. Set it to the timeline 128 for the lifetime. Source, I want that on faces. Jittered, I'll set it to random. And then I'm going to go down here to velocity, set that to 0 so they're not shooting off the surface. I'm going to go to field weights, set that gravity to 0. And then I'm going to go to viewport display velocity so that I can see the color of my particles and how fast they're moving. Again, blue means they're not moving. Royal blue means that they're not moving. Red means they're moving at full speed. And then render, show emitter turn off. Viewport, show emitter turn off. I don't like to see the emitter. And then physics is good. Rotation is, I can leave that since we're going to use just spheres for the particles in the end. Cache, everything else is good. So we got that set. And if I hit play, we see the fire sim and we have our particles now. Okay, nothing is happening yet, right? All I want is these particles static and attached to the new sphere we have here, the half sphere, half dome. All right, next thing we need to do is add in a force field. So we're going to add in a force field, and we're going to use fluid flow. And again, what fluid flow does is it tells our particles, hey, there is a sim happening. Please be influenced by the simulation. And so we need to select our domain to notify the particles. We got that set up. And then what I found, as I've mentioned in previous videos, you have to tweak your strength and flow. So what I found so far working with this is 8 is a really good number to start off with. So if I hit shift and back arrow to set my timeline back, then hit space bar, now something is happening. Okay, so now we got something. Our particles are being influenced by our fluid sim. Okay, so if I rewind it again, and then I'm just going to turn off the fluid sim so we don't see it, it's still going to be influenced. Okay, so we got that hidden, and now it's still being influenced. All right, so one issue that we're dealing with is we have all this information, which is the particles shooting downward, and I don't want that. So what I need to do is create a barrier so that these particles are not shooting downward, and I'm missing all these particles, because eventually what's going to happen is that I have this currently set to 128,000 particles, right? And when I go to final phases, I go to about 750 to 1 million particles. That's about what my laptop can handle in these particle sims. So that's final. And so I'll have all these particles that I'm losing down here, right? I don't want to lose those. So we just simply need to create a plane. Oops. So we need to just create a plane, scale it out. And I'll look at it from a top view, so I make sure I got everything covered. So scale it out more. And then from a side view, I'm just going to lower it. And the reason being is because these particles are shooting off so fast. And this is just kind of like my assumption just from being in 3D so long. I just need to give it enough room. This is why I'm moving it down. I'm giving it enough room for the computer to calculate the particles colliding with the plane. If I have it real close, particles are just going to shoot right through, and there's not going to be time to calculate that. So that's why I'm just giving it a lot of space. That's just my pseudo theory of what's happening. It's not exact, so don't hold me to it. All right, so I'm gonna move my particle sim up here into this collection just to keep things organized. And then I'm gonna go to physics and then add a collision. So now if I play it back, we'll play it in side view. Our particles should collide with the plane now. Okay. Cool. So now if I'll just show you too what was happening. So I'll move this back up just to show what I was dealing with when I was doing R&D of these sims. Oh, so it's actually working for this time. That's cool, because before I was dealing with the problem where they were shooting right there. So it's actually working. So that's good. So I don't have to worry about it. So now you can see I'm saving all these particles and they're bouncing off the surface and moving upward. Okay. This one's still for some reason, but that's okay. So we have a sim that's working, right? Now, let's say I'm ready to finalize this, right? I'm actually going to turn this flow down just a tad bit. Let me turn it down to 0.6 just to loosen them up. So it's going to be a little bit more loose. Expand out more too. Okay, so I like this, right? This is a cool sim. All right. Nice sim. All right, so let's say I'm happy with that, right? So now what I need to do is go here into back to my sphere particles, and then I'm going to turn this up to 750K. All right, so I rewind it, hit play. It's going to be a lot slower, but it's still happening. Turn this to solid so we can see the sim happening, right? Lot more particles. All right, so I'm going to pause it at 30 and then we'll talk. All right, so we'll pause it right there. And so let's say I'm happy with this, right? Got all my particles set up. Okay, now it's time to move into the next phase. And so being that I'm about to start rendering, I'm going to select this plane and I'm going to go up here and then visibility. And I don't want this plane showing up in my viewport, and I don't want it showing up in the renders. So it's not going to show up in the renders. So I still have the collision happening, and it's not going to show up in the viewport just to keep things clean, right? And the other thing now, so here's the good part. So here's the part that I want to show you guys, and this is what I've just learned. So we're going to use particle instance, okay? And what we need to do, I'm going to go up here to my geometry collection, and I'm going to turn off this particle for now. And I'm going to create a plane. And what I'm going to do with this plane is I'm going to go to vertex mode. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to hit M for merge, and I'm going to merge at center. Okay. So now what's happening is I have a single vertex. The object is still there. As you can see, plane 001. However, it's just a single vertex. Okay, so let's rename this object, and we're going to rename it plane particle instance. Let's just call it that 001. Okay, and so now it's still an object, and that means I can add a modifier on it still. So if I add modifier physics particle instance, and then now I can go here and select my particle sim, right? Sphere particle sim. That's what we named it. And if you see, it is replicating or instancing my particle simulation. Okay. So what happens is that single vertice that I created, it's taking that vertice and instancing that against the particles, right? So if I had it as a plane, it would instance that as a plane to each particle, right? So now I'm just using the vertices instead. So now what I could do is I can use geometry nodes from here. Okay, so let me turn this toolbar off, and then I'm going to switch this window to geometry nodes. Press N, and I'm gonna hit new, and then I'm going to go mesh vertices. Nope, vertices. So vertices to, no, that's not it. What was it? Mesh to points. That's what it was. I'm sorry. Mesh to points. All right, so there we go, mesh the points. All right, so now I've taken each point and I've made it geometry now, right? And look how fast my viewport is still working. So in my other video, when I was doing particles and I created a sphere and then I had the particle system reference that sphere, my whole viewport slowed down so much. I could barely move when I had 1 million particles or 750,000, right? So I have 750,000 particles, but yet I still have my viewport speed to be able to develop my shot, right? So I can set my size here, right? And then I can also randomize. I can randomize the size. So I can add a random value node, plug it into here, right? And then set this to like 0.0025, and then this max to 0.005, right? So now we're getting somewhere, right? So now I have some randomization in the different sizes too now to create variation, okay? And then in setting up my material, I can add a set material node, right? And then select the object, go to my material tab, create a new material. I'll just leave it named as material, and we'll set it to like a goldish color right there. So we'll set it to something like that. And then I'll set it to 0.3 for roughness. And then I can go over here, pick the material. So I got a material set. Okay. And then we're going to turn our camera on. So now we're going to do some look development. Pull my camera back. Oops, not the object, the camera. Pull the camera back. Switch to our camera view. Okay. I'm going to keep the camera pretty static, and I'm going to mess with this. So now I got free reign over this, right? I have my particle system here in my parsim collection, right? And then I have my geometry, my particle instance, and that's referencing the particle sim, right? So it's, all it is instancing it. So this is an object on its own, and I have free range over it, just like I had with the limbics in my other videos, right? So now, right, I can create a whole shot with this and have free reign of what I want to do with this particle instance. And another beautiful thing about this too, I can make copies of it, right? And my viewport is still not slowing down. So I have 750K times 3 right now, right? It's way over 1 million, okay? And then I can rotate them however I want, right? So I got all this control. I can scale it up. So just like we have with a limbic, right? I got control over it like this. And now here's the other thing too, because in the beginning of this video, I was playing the animation that I did with something like this too, right? I did a similar thing, just what I'm doing right now. I have motion blur back. So with the limbic mesh, it's tough to get motion blur to work properly right now in Blender. And doing it this method and I render out, I have no problems when I'm dealing with motion blur now. So I got that too back. So, okay, let's move into just look development. So we're going to pull this down a little bit. Okay. And then I'm also going to create a new empty for my focus point of my camera. And as I always do, I make it real big so I always know where that focus point is. And then I'm going to press F2, name it focus point, and then move this to my cam like that. Select the camera, change the focal length to 135 as I always do. Viewport, depth of field, set that, focus point, boom. Sure, let's go shallow, depth of field too. And then we'll move our camera back even more, just like that. And then from there, let's see. Next thing we do lighting. Okay, so we got the camera set. Oh, we need to set our frame. So I'm going to do like a portrait frame, by the way. So like iPhone format. So here, format 1080 by 1920, like that. All right. So now I have to move this whole particle sim down. And that's okay, because this whole particle sim, it gets up there pretty high. So it's probably going to stretch all the way through this frame anyway. So it's not a problem that I have it way down there to me. So I can actually just set this back, and it's constantly referencing that particle sim. So I'm going to move the sphere down too, because these are all the particles we're seeing from the start point, and I just want that out of frame. So It's going to play slow, but let's let it play through so we can get something out of this. It's actually playing a lot faster too, which is cool because I have the parsim collection hidden. That's probably why. So eventually it's going to start shooting upward, if you remember right, where those particles are really red. Now I'll say this. So we do lose something out of this whole setup now. Okay. Now, the only thing that I hate about this workflow is I am losing my particle information data. So in my previous video, when I was doing the shockwaves, you probably remember where I plugged in that shader particle info and I was able to pull the velocity information out and use it as color information because I was able to get like color variation into my particles, and that was through the particle info node in the shader section. However, doing it this way, I cannot do that because there's no velocity information in this particle instance. I do not know that workaround yet. Maybe one of you guys do out there. That'll be great to find out. That's why I do these videos, to put these questions out there. So if any of you guys know the answer to that of how to port the velocity information from the particles into your particle instance, that would be great to know because this workflow is so much better. Now it's just, we need that color data now. All right. So let's play with a light. So let's add an area light, move it to the right, and then I'm going to rotate it upwards 90 degrees, scale it up. And then I'm going to start the render too. And then we need to add more light power to it too. So let's go to our light, 1024. And there's our light. And then I'm going to turn off background too. I'm actually probably put a card back there and put a gradient background for this one. Just do something different this time. So yeah, I'll do that. So let's add another plane. Send it backwards. And then we're going to rotate it up and we're going to start scaling it out for our background. There it goes. Now it's showing up. And we're going to stretch it upward. So S and then Y, I think. Is that going to work? Let's turn this off for now. So SZ, there we go. That's what I want. So SZ, now we're stretching it up. So now I got the frame filled out. Cool. And then now we need to work on our background. So we'll work on that real quick for the shot. I'm going to hit render again. And then I'm going to put on geometry nodes again. Select the object. I want these particles bigger. So I'm going to set this to 0.01. And then 0.0025. Maybe I should leave it. No, we'll go 0.005. Yeah, we'll go with that for now. Maybe I'll change it later, but we'll start with this. All right, so let's go to our shader. I'm going to select the background, create a new material too. And we're going to create an emission so that we control it on its own. And I might go with something like a gray this time, just something more muted instead of like a colored background. So we'll do some value down to like 0.5, 0.2, 0.1. Yeah, we'll do something like that. That's cool. Try one more thing. 0.05. Yeah, I like that. That looks pretty nice and decent. So we can read the whole silhouette of the particle basically. Because I could have done something like this. I've been doing this a lot lately where it's just on a black background, which is cool too. I like how it kind of just the left side kind of just disappears into the void, right? But just trying something different this time. So we got that. And then I'm also just going to turn off denoising so I can see the detail. So like when I'm doing particle sims lately, I've just been turning off denoise while it renders. And then I'm going to set viewport to 10. It's already set. All right, got that. All right, so let's play with our lighting too now. So we're gonna add a light target. So if you guys don't know this trick, I'll show you this too. So we can create another empty plane access and F2, and I'm gonna call it LGT TGT, which means light target. And then I'll move that to the light collection. Oops, wrong one. Got that there. Also move my area light to here too. And then I have my area light selected. I'm gonna go here to constraints tab, add object constraint, track to, select the LGT TGT. All right, and so now if I move this new empty around, our light follows it. So if you're familiar with other 3D programs where you got a target on your light, this is how you can create it. Okay, so if I also move the area light, it's going to track to that target. As you can see, it stays focused on the target. So what I can do now, I actually saw something pretty cool. So if I do now, what I want to do is I want to style my light, right? And so I'm going to use, in traditional like photography or sets, if you're working on a photography set, they have what you call barn doors, if you guys are not familiar with them. And those barn doors will like let in a certain amount of light or create a certain shape to the light. And so that's what we want to do. And the way we do that is using our spread. So if I set the spread to 0, right, I've just turned my whole light into a laser that is taking the shape of this light source, right? So it's this big square laser that's being shot into space. And that's why you're seeing this hard line here. Okay. So now if I play with the size of it, right, I'm just creating this strip of light that's going across the surface of the particles. Okay. And so now I just want it to kind of go diagonal across the whole surface. So I'm going to move it upward. And then I'm going to move the light target to the front too. Here, like that. And then also play with my light a little bit to see what I can get. Like that. That's cool. Let's see if I go further behind what I can get. That's pretty cool too. I might go with something like that. So we'll try that. And then now that I've got everything set up, because I don't want this super hard angle or super hard line on the light. And so this is just to position things to where I want it, right? So now what I could do is take the spread and open it back up. So I can go like 32, right? And as you can see, I've opened up the spread and the shadows up here and the shadows down here and the core of the light is here. So now, being that I've made my light more narrow, I'm focusing all that light power into one place, right? And so that's why it's getting brighter. And so now I just need to pull back on the power of the light. So 128, 512, 256. That's good. Really balanced. So that's a nice look. I like that. Another effect you can do too in playing with stuff like this is I can add some volume to it, right? So let's say I want to add a volume. I'm gonna create a new collection, matter of fact, to keep that. Well, I'll just leave geometry. All right, so I can create this too. That you're gonna like this. So the fact that we have a narrow light, you'll really see this too. So I can create a box, right? I'll create a box around this whole scene. Cube. There we go. And I'll scale it up to fill it out everything here like that. So now it's covering the whole particle system. And then I'm going to go back to my shader node, create a new material. And then I'm going to use a volume scatter. Yeah. So I'm just going to use a simple volume scatter, right? I'm just going to plug it here. Oops. I'm going to plug it here into the volume output. And then I'm going to get rid of this printable BSDF. Okay. So now if I go and render again, right, now we got some volume effects happening. So if I go like 0.1, now we can really see it. See that? The fact that our light is so narrow, it's kind of like a laser, right? We're getting like a strip of light coming through space. and then I can go like 0.01. It doesn't need to be crazy. It's just subtle, a subtle light volume. 0.005, right? And then I can also say like, okay, well, maybe I don't need this background. Let's see what it looks like if I turn off the background, right? I'm selecting that sphere. So let's select the background. I think this is the background. Let's make sure we name it. And we can call this volume. Volume, just like that. And then background. And then I can hide this. So now we're looking at it against the black background, which is really cool. So maybe this is the look to go with, right? So look development again, you know. Selecting that volume. I can go maybe a little bit lower, 0.002. Just really subtle. Doesn't need to be anything crazy. I'll go 0.003. That's going to be the magic number right there. So yeah, I can go with that. That's cool. And then I can add some warmth to the light source too, or I can just keep it very neutral. Let's see, area light. And then I can set it to scrim. Again, I'm using Light Wrangler as I've said in other videos. Oh, I messed it up. And then I can set this back to 32. So now it has some warmth to it, as you can see, right? It feels like an actual natural light that's coming through with some warmth. And then now I can say, well, I can go up here to my render settings, color management. Right now set to AGX. I can try Chronos to see what that looks like. Nah, we'll go with AGX. I can play with the contrast, high contrast maybe. That's a cool look. Base contrast. I'll go none again. Punchy. That's a cool look. I'll stay none. I like what I have by default because I want to see all this information too. And then also I have my add-ons too, my other film Final LUT. So I can turn this on, enable compositor, and then I can select this one here I always use. It's AFCA 200 Futura, I think it's called. So I got the LUT on there. I can go composite, and then we'll see the existing node tree that Final LUT built. And then I'm right behind it. So this is the Final LUT tree that it automatically gets built. And then I could just right behind it, I can add in some dispersion. So lens, distortion, plug that. Now I can add some dispersion. So like chromatic aberration, right? All us 3D artists like this stuff, but very subtle. So if you actually see it in photography, it's actually very subtle. And the thing about the chromatic aberration, if you guys don't know, photographers try to get rid of that stuff, but it's really hard to get rid of if you don't have the right tools. So keep it very subtle. If you're trying to go for realism, you don't have to overdo it. But yeah, if you want to overdo it, I mean, it's a style, but try to keep it very subtle. So that's what I'm doing here. Like I can barely see it. I'm sure when I render the high res, I'm going to see it. And so that's why I'm setting it down to 0.01. And then glare 2. And the thing about glare, if you guys ever see a camera, sometimes cameras have like a hood on it to block glare. So that's what those hoods are for. When you see like a cone around the lens, it helps to block some of that glare. But if you take it off, that's how you can cause glare on a lens. And you can just, you know, if you're using an artificial light, you can point a light kind of off-centered towards that camera to create like a glare effect onto the lens. So again, you want to keep that subtle too. So like on my camera, I have a Sony A7 II. Glare on my camera, it looks something like this. Very subtle. It's not crazy at all when it happens on my lens. And it depends on the lens too. It really depends on the lens that you're using. So I can say threshold, let's go like 1.2, just so that we can get rid of some of it. I'm gonna go 2. It's like it's contained in this area here. So it's very subtle, and I'm gonna set this to high quality. Even more I got rid of. Okay, so there we go. Like this is looking really good. I'm liking the way this is going. So now, you know, what you can do from here is you can render a whole animation out, right? So now it's ready to render out. So now I can just set this to render overnight, and then so far with the animations that I'm rendering off of my equipment, and if you guys don't know, I'm actually doing all this stuff on a laptop. I got a janky setup actually. I try to keep my setup pretty cheap. I like to put my money in render power, and so I run a RTX 4080 that sits on my desktop, and I'm running that into my laptop via PCI. Not PCI, but Thunderbolt. So that's how I'm running my stuff right now. But it works, and and I love it. So I got high GPU power, cheap setup, but it works for me. You know, you don't get the full power from the GPU card. I'm gonna make that clear. So if you guys are looking at doing an external setup, you do not get the full power. But this is the most power I've ever had as a CG artist, after all these years, because you know equipment can be expensive, including licenses for 3D too, and all the software we need. So that's why I went the route that I went, because I just wanted to put my money into the card. But being that, yeah, so you can put an animation out now, and like what I've been doing for my animation, I've been setting this to like 256 for particles, and I'll turn off denoise, and because there's so many little tiny details and stuff, so you don't want to smudge that stuff out. So I'll turn off denoise, and I'll render at like 256 max samples, and that does well, and it renders out pretty fast. And I render out a EXR file. So where is my output? And so I'll output an EXR file. I already have a existing node tree set up for my particle sims in Natron, and I just run it through Natron. And what I'll do is do some hue saturation changes. If I want like a different color, that tends to work out because I'm doing a EXR 32-bit. So I have a lot of color information and flexibility to change things around. So yeah, and so the way you can get variations out from there is you can go back into your fluid field, right? So this is how you create variations. You go to your fluid field. So okay, let's start over. So I can render this out as an animation, right? Because this whole particle sim is a simulation and it's animation. So I can go to frame 64. As you can see, we got frame 128, which is the last frame. Oh, exploded, messed it up because I didn't play it all the way through. That's why. Let's go to 65, see what we get. Right, 64, 75, right? And so this whole thing is a simulation, right? So I can render this animation out. Once I have one version out, I'll render another animation. And when I do that next version, I will go here to fluid field. I'll go to the settings, and I will play with the strength and flow. Now I know most times so far out of all the animations I've rendered, if I set it past like 16 or sometimes 12, it tends to break. That's when it breaks down. So I'll never go past 16 or 12, and I'll just mess with combinations and I'll render that out. Then I'll do another combination, I'll render that out. I'll do another combination, I can render that out. Or you can save out multiple files and then just render it through a farm, or you can render it on the command line. So this is how you can get multiple variations. And then in Natron, I don't even mess with the color in 3D. I'll just change the color in Natron instead. So good workflow. It's good workflow. It's a fast way to get out a lot of the variations. I love this. But the main thing in this video I wanted to share was that particle instance part, because as you've seen in this video, I've been able to constantly develop the shot to its final form as we're looking at right now, because I wasn't slowed down so much. So I'm able to move through everything a lot faster. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This was part 2, and I will see you guys on the next one.